So David Golumbia doesn't like Bitcoin very much, if you hadn't already gotten that from the article. I'm going to assume that you've read the article and have recognized it as a fairly strong polemic against Bitcoin. I'm also going to assume you know what Bitcoin is, although that's a little bit dangerous. The opposite is also dangerous. If I gave you a quick gloss of what Bitcoin is, it would be really hard to not to fall into some of the traps that Golumbia has set here. For example, if I told you that Bitcoin was an alternative currency, obviously that's something he's arguing it is not, right? Any more than my Delta Sky Miles or my collection of Pogs are an alternative currency. That these only gain currency when they are spendable. And there's a reason that, for example, at least for now, you can't spend Bitcoin on Amazon. You can't pay your taxes with Bitcoin without converting them into US currency first. And part of the reason is that this is, I think probably a better definition for the way what Bitcoin has become. And frankly, I think Golumbia is writing here several years ago and still manages to predict this. It was already the case then, and it's even more so the case now, is that it is a speculative asset. He references kind of the tulip mania and this idea of people spending money on things that don't have any inherent value. I mean, a Marxist critique says that no money has inherent value and that a lot of other goods that are speculative don't have value either. But he says particularly in this case, it's just a made up thing. Frankly, that part of the critique feels a little bit naive because a lot of the things we spend money on are made up things, right? Doesn't mean that they're not currency or money. It just means that they're not made up. The main thrust of his argument is that that a lot of people see this as a kind of emancipatory or even an anarchist project. In fact, while I was rereading this for giving this presentation, I ran across in one of my anarchist groups this question, like, is Bitcoin good for anarchists? And the vast majority of people kind of agreed with Golumbia that no, it's not. And then there were a handful of people that said, oh, of course it is. It's changing things. But a lot of their arguments really reinforced what Golumbia is arguing here, which is that it is sort of a freeway to John Galt. It's a way to trick people into becoming Randian sorts of extreme libertarian right-wing zealots. And, there's good, that Ron Paul is backing Bitcoin would certainly suggest that there are folks and that a number of other people on the far right are backing Bitcoin would certainly seem to suggest that he's on the right track there. And part of it is he's arguing that this is another speculative good. So that I think he's probably on the right track there. He also argues that the basis of trying to cut out the central banks is part of the kind of Elders of Zion long-term anti-globalist, which means Jewish cabal, sort of right-wing conspiracy theory. It may very well be that, but there are lots of people who also don't like banks. It's not just, that's part of the issue here is that he's right on all of this. And he's right that the right wing likes Bitcoin, but he's not necessarily right that they're the only ones who do. So I would generally agree that, particularly for my group, that it doesn't appeal to sort of left-leaning and anarchist groups, even anarchists who want to, again, bypass government, right? By definition, they want to get rid of kind of coercive government. Even to those folks, this is bad news because it doesn't, it says it's getting rid of these while actually embracing pieces of it. This is why at some point he says, it's a nominal rejection of governmental authority. And we definitely see this now, right? As banks are starting to embrace Bitcoin and financial institutions are, it doesn't feel as, it may be still anti-central bank, right? We don't have a sort of structure for, it's the invisible hand without any real hands, right? We don't have any structure for setting interest rates or any of the other things that central banks do. But the commercial banks are using it as a hedge and as a speculative asset. So yeah, that's the main thrust here. And one of the questions that I think remains is whether some of the ideas that undergird Bitcoin, including smart contracts and a distributed ledger, whether this distribution of this technology for distribution more broadly, of which Bitcoin is just one and currencies are just one implementation, although by far the most widely embraced, whether those might still have some role here. And I suspect they do, to a larger project that goes across the left and right, that cuts more evenly. But here I think the idea is that this is a Trojan horse, right? And I think it's definitely polemic, and I think he loses some of the nuance in that argument, but I think generally speaking he's right. That this is a project that both advances the libertarian cause and at the same time mainstreams it to a certain extent. If you've bought Bitcoin, I don't know, some people have bought Bitcoin just as a speculative asset, right? Just in the same way that they would bet on black. So it's just gambling, right? If it's just that, then that's one thing. But if you've used Bitcoin and kind of purchased things with it or whatever, then that's a different issue. And that's kind of drawing you into this idea of the libertarian extreme end. Part of that is assassination markets, which we kind of encounter in different places. This idea that, Bitcoin will allow us to kill people who are in government, and that's the best way to get rid of governments, is just to kind of kill all the people who work for a government. The other piece of this is this is the extreme end of what one version of sort of crypto anarchy would look like, right? This idea of, the cypherpunks go in different directions, but a lot of them do draw in this area, which is, we need to get rid of government, but not markets. And so it kind of extracts markets from the stranglehold that governments have put on them and says, we want to do this separated from government. What does that mean for public participation and publics? Well, it kind of, when you move things out, we've talked about publics between governments and the market. This pretty much eliminates everything but the market, which is concerning, at least for those who think that there is a space outside of market spaces. All right, I'll stop there. I'm interested in how you guys took this. I'm interested in how you feel Bitcoin might be useful as a political project. He says it's a political project for the far right. Do you agree with that? I'll be curious to see what you say in the comments. Thanks.